Abi's visit comes one day after the African Union suspended Sudan's membership. Instead, the AU is backing the opposition Declaration of Freedom and Change Forces alliance. The regional bloc supports DFCF's demand for civilian rule.
The Declaration of Freedom and Change has issued a set of fundamental conditions before entering into the detailed negotiations regarding the political procedure. First, the necessary acknowledgement by the Military Council of the crimes committed. Second, the formation of a national investigative committee into the dispersal of the sit-in. Third, the release of political detainees and war prisoners. And fourth, allowing public freedom.
The opposition and the ruling Transitional Military Council have been in talks for several weeks, but negotiations collapsed after Monday's violence at a protester camp in Khartoum. The crackdown is the worst bloodshed since the ouster of former President Omar al-Bashir in April. Karen Roberts, CGTN.
We're now joined for more on this story by CGTN's Girum Chala. He's been following up this story for us, and he's on the line from Addis Ababa. Girum, Ethiopia's Prime Minister held separate talks with Sudan's ruling military council and leaders of the Declaration of Freedom and Change Force. Do we know what was discussed in those meetings?
Well, Peninah, in Khartoum, the discussions were focused on returning Sudan into normalcy mainly because, as you have followed over the last few days, the killings on the street and, the downgrading of the situation into a bit of a chaos is something that worried leaders like Abiy Ahmed, who is also IGAD's chairperson. Now, the discussions also would like to bring all parties back to the table so that an amicable solution can be found. And as you have heard, one of the best outcomes is the two sides, including the military and the opposition, are ready to return for talk and so that they can find peaceful solutions. So far, this is what we know, but more will be coming out.
Girum, what has the Prime Minister achieved so far with his mediation, and does he have a time frame for a result?
So, like I said earlier, the most important achievement for him is to bring all sides back to the negotiating table. This has been missing for the last few days. That's what caused, according to analysts, that's what caused the killings and the frustration from the protesters' side at the same time. Now, we don't really have a clear timetable. We have heard that the Prime Minister should be returned to Khartoum, but in the meantime, he has formed some sort of a committee which can handle some of the preliminary work of bringing these two sides together so that he can finally return and put them to the table so that negotiations can clearly start. Now, Sudan, according to the African Union itself, needs to return its leadership into civilian administration. Before that, elections need to take place as soon as possible. So the Prime Minister should also see through this kind of implementation plans from the African Union. And the AU had already vowed to support Sudan in this journey, and IGAD is also, as a regional council, needs to be part of this process. Ethiopia as a neighbor, as an IGAD chair, and also as a responsible member of the African Union will see all of these activities happen in Sudan. And we don't really clearly know what's going to happen next, but we for sure understand that all parties are ready to talk.
But, Girum, putting it forward, what should we expect in the coming weeks?
Well, the expectation also had optimism. Sudanese aside, all of them, according to those who have been in the talks of the military council and also the opposition, understand that they want peace. They don't want Sudan to be downgraded into a chaotic country, something that has been seen in Libya. They don't want it to happen in Sudan because of the change of a government or a removal of a long-serving leader. So the outcome is something that we expect for a civilian administration, along with the military administration, to be formed so that they can see through the election plan and also the formation of a legitimate government, constitutional government, at the end of the day. And for that, the Prime Minister has vowed, and we are hoping also that other regional leaders will also join efforts with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed alongside the African Union, and we hope that that's going to happen as soon as possible.
All right, Girum, thank you for that update. Girum Chala on the line from Addis Ababa. Meanwhile, the United Nations is pushing for an independent investigation of deaths during the recent military crackdown and is seeking the military's government cooperation to hold those responsible accountable.
The humanitarian situation in Sudan is worrying. More than 100 people have been reportedly killed and 800 others have been injured in violent clashes across the country. Most of the casualties were in Khartoum after a violent raid by security personnel on Monday. According to media reports, security forces opened fire on protesters outside the country's military headquarters and killed several people. The UN is now pushing for justice.
The Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, has urged the Sudanese authorities to facilitate an independent investigation into the death and hold those responsible accountable.
The lives of healthcare workers and patients also remain at risk.
The World Health Organization said today it is gravely concerned about the impact of the violence on people in need, as well as on health workers and medical facilities, noting that these actions violate international human rights law. Healthcare workers appear to have been targeted for helping the injured, with reports of rapes and female health workers, destruction of mobile health clinics to treat protesters, and looting of medical equipment.
The UN Population Fund and its partners are expected to send a mobile team to provide reproductive health services to respond to gender-based violence cases. The World Health Organization also plans to import 3,000 more surgical kits to cover all of Sudan to help save the situation. Chomrono, CGTN.
In Nigeria, citizens have been reacting to a recent report of the discovery of more looted fans by the country's late former military ruler, Sani Abacha. Authorities in Jersey said they have seized more than $267 million from the family and associates of the late Abacha. According to Jersey's Civil Asset Recovery Fund, the laundered funds recovered from confiscated assets belonging to the son of the late dictator, Mohamed Abacha, was derived from corruption during the military leader's rule in Nigeria. CGTN's Deji Badmas has more on that report.
It's difficult to tell how much money the late General Sani Abacha laundered while he was Nigeria's military head of state between 1993 and 1998 when he died in office. Some reports have put the figure at billions of dollars, and every now and then, fresh discoveries are made. The latest discovery of more than $267 million, or around 82 billion naira in a Jersey bank account, has left many in Nigeria stunned and wondering just how much more is left.
Who is that person that has been able to spend 1,000,000 days in life? No one. No one. Why do you need 82 billion? What do you need it for?
And I can only feel sorry for my country, Nigeria. And if that money also comes to the system, I think we're in dire need of such funds right now to fund even the national budget.
But not everyone is surprised at the new discovery 21 years after the death of Abacha. Anti-corruption activist Lanre Suraj is one of them.
I'm not surprised to the extent that the families of Abacha are still alive. So they're still working with some of the banks and some of the enablers that assisted in the diversion and laundering of those money.
There are reports that the latest recovered sum may be more than the figure that has been put out in the media, and that America and Jersey Island would get a share of the money. It's something that is not going down well with many in Nigeria.
This is actually Nigerian money, except that it went through the American banks or it was dominated in the American dollars. The United States of America had no business sharing in the money. And this is actually part of a total amount of about $500 million. About $150 million was also recovered in France. About $6 million was recovered in Ireland, and some amount also recovered in the UK itself. So in total, you're talking about $500 million.
A senior Nigerian presidential aide says the next phase in the process is for Nigeria, Jersey Island, and the United States to sign an MOU on how the funds should be managed before it is eventually repatriated to Nigeria. Now, there's still no clarity yet on the issue of sharing, which is setting to generate more controversy in the coming days. The Nigerian government has made it very clear that when the money finally comes, it would be used for infrastructure development. But there is yet no timeline on when exactly the money will come. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The African Union has commemorated the World Food Safety Day at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa. The UN General Assembly in December last year designated every 7th June as World Food Safety Day. The day is marked to bring to the attention of the world the dangers of unsafe food and how to help prevent and manage foodborne risks. CGTN's Grim Chala has more.
Food safety is now a huge global concern, and available data suggests foodborne disease caused by consuming unsafe food make 600 million people fall ill and cause 420,000 premature deaths annually. This issue affects the developing world, like that of the African continent, pretty badly. At the African Union headquarters, the first ever Food Safety Day has been commemorated. The deputy chairperson of the commission, Kwasi Kwate, said lack of attention to food safety is making Africa pay a huge price.
The limited attention that we have been giving to food safety and food safety systems can be self-defeating. All too frequently, our populations are negatively affected by unsafe food. Our children bear a greater burden of this problem. Our products are rejected due to non-compliance for food safety standards.
It was last year the UN's General Assembly proclaimed June 7 to be remembered as World Food Safety Day. And for the continent working towards achieving food security, the day is said to be a reminder of the synergized effort that needs to be exerted towards assuring food safety in Africa.
We are really working on for food safety, and we believe that the CFTA that is going to be launched in Niamey next month can say that the agriculture sector is ready to start. We are just waiting for infrastructure to play their role.
At the moment, food safety issues are high on the agenda of the African Union's daily duties. This is because without food safety, the agriculture sector development is clearly being hampered.
Food safety, therefore, is an important precondition to export markets, and if not addressed proactively, this can be an impediment to trade in agricultural goods and services and the consequent loss in competitiveness of our agriculture sector in Africa.
The burden of unsafe food is most felt here in Africa, where according to the World Health Organization, 137,000 people die of the same cause each year. The African Union now wants to foster more dialogue and inspire actions to enhance food safety across the continent, not only to prevent disease, death, but also increase productivity. One strategy here is creating widespread public awareness on the matter. Grumchala CGTN at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa.
U.S. President Donald Trump said in a tweet late Friday that Washington has reached an agreement with Mexico on migration. As a result, Trump said the punishing tariffs he had been threatening were indefinitely suspended. CGTN's Owen Fairclough has more from Washington.
The United States and Mexico have pulled themselves back from the brink of an all-out trade war after U.S. President Donald Trump returned from a tour of Europe to tweet, "The tariffs scheduled to be implemented by the U.S. on Monday against Mexico are hereby indefinitely suspended." The U.S. and the Trump administration specifically complained to Mexico about what it considered unacceptable levels of undocumented migrants entering the United States via Mexico. But those tariffs have been suspended because the two sides managed to find common ground after days of negotiations. Mexico has agreed to deploy its National Guard throughout Mexico Mexico has also agreed to implement joint migrant protocols, which essentially means that undocumented migrants will be returned to Mexico for processing rather than in the United States. Financial markets also are likely to breathe a sigh of relief. The US is embroiled in its own trade battle with China. Many investors and indeed farmers in the rural Midwest of the United States were extremely concerned about retaliatory tariffs that Mexico would have imposed against the United States had those tariffs gone ahead. And there were concerns among some lawmakers here in the United States that hundreds of thousands of US jobs would have been lost. But for now, it seems all of that is on hold, with these two countries, these two trading partners, managing to reach an agreement. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
While the US and Mexico may have reached a deal, the trade war between China and the US is still ongoing. CGTN's Guan Yang takes us to the largest port in northeastern China to find out whether the extension of China-US trade dispute has affected business there.
In China's northeast, over 99% of goods traded overseas move through the port of Dalian. Earlier this year, Liaoning province formed a new company to run its ports, including Dalian. And after China Merchants Group took over the controlling stake, boosting efficiency was on the top of the reform list.
In the past, to offload a 200,000-ton container ship, we often used 6 staff per freight station. Now we've cut the number of workers down to 2.
Some Western observers predict that the escalation of the year-long trade war between China and the US will hamper the growth of China's container shipping business. But here, at the northeastern China's largest port, the real situation is quite the opposite. 13% growth in container volume, a first quarter figure from Liaoning Port Group. In the shipping industry, container volume of any given period is a strong indicator of how the current operations are going. And the profits from the container service division were up by a stunning 35%.
After mergers and acquisitions, the new structure enables the management to reorganize the client base and remove vicious competition between ports. We've also dedicated all of our efforts to generating new businesses, like several sea routes to Southeast Asia were established.
In terms of the group's domestic operations, divisions like Auto Terminal have taken full advantage of the existing sea routes. New vehicles are being shipped from the northeast to southern parts of the country both ways, a much cheaper option compared to land transport.
Even with the sluggish demand in the domestic auto market, we've managed to achieve a 15% growth in profits during the first 5 months. Next, we shall expand the capacity of our sea-rail combined routes. Once the market bounces back, we will have the right services ready.
So how has the tit-for-tat trade dispute affected the largest port in China's northeast? The figures from Liaoning Port Group could offer part of the overall picture. Meanwhile, it's also worth noting how ports on the other side of the Pacific are coping. Guan Yang, CGTN, Dalian.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, 86 displaced South Sudanese return home following peace deal. And entrepreneur manufactures a portable water filtration device in South Africa.
So your parking is higher?
Yeah.
我很想看看这个世界，很想了解不同的地方的文化。
不管你在哪里，你都可以创作，你都可以思考，你都可以感受到音乐。
我会非常想念他们，而不只是这个风景优美的小岛。
因为中国是我们家，然后肯尼亚太美了。
哦，真。
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's head over to South Sudan, where the process of resettling internally displaced persons is underway. As violence in the once explosive Jonglei region abates, 86 people recently left a UN protection of civilian site to rebuild their lives. CGTN's Wilkis Tanyabwa has the story.
A group of 86 people are leaving a UN protection camp in South Sudan. After a peace deal in 2018, they now have the confidence to head home. Mostly women and children, they're returning to the town of Uai in the Jonglei region. They are welcomed back by friends and family who they have not seen in over 5 years.
I had wanted to come here ever since last year, but couldn't make it. Now, I thank God that I am here in Uai with my children. I believe that my suffering is finally over.
I thank the United Nations for the 6 years they have hosted us in the civilian protection camps from 2013 to 2019. It is good that they have protected victims until this point, where we can survive on our own.
Jonglei state was once a combustible mix of political opposition and militias, which helped to spark the 5-year civil war. But with a reduction in violence, ordinary civilians are now optimistic about their future.
Just by sending them back to the environment that they love with their relatives, that is also in a way protecting them. They are moving from a situation where it's like, you've seen a POC, it's like you're locked in somewhere. But when they go back home, they're now free to do other things like cultivation, farming, fishing, business even go back to, some people can go back to school. So we are trying to facilitate them to move on with their lives.
Over 3,000 people who sought sanctuary at the protection site have expressed the desire to return. This group of 86 civilians represents just a few of the millions of refugees and displaced families who are hoping to begin their journey home. Wilkis Tanyabwa, CGTN.
South Africa has made massive improvements in providing access to clean water. However, there is still some way to go in reaching the thousands of people living in outlying and rural areas. These citizens are often forced to source water from nearby rivers, streams and dams, which is not always safe for drinking. Sumitra Naidu spoke to a young entrepreneur that's found a solution to this problem.
Sishle Ntuli has partnered with an American-based company to manufacture and distribute portable water filtration devices.
It all started when I moved down to the Eastern Cape. I traveled a lot around the rural areas, and then I saw the needs of the people who are staying there. The major needs were water and the diseases in waters. People were dying every day from water-borne diseases.
One portable filter costs $84. It's expensive for poor households, but Ntuli believes it is an investment. The filters have a 10-year lifespan with the capacity to clean up to 400,000 liters of water.
The product is what we call kidney dialysis system. It's the very same way how your kidney works as a human. The product is made out of hollow fiber membranes, which are a 0.1 micron filtration unit. By 0.1 micron filtration, it basically means the pore sizes of the filter are too small that there is no bacteria that can pass through those filters.
Dirty water taken from various sources was sent to labs for independent testing here in South Africa and found that the filter destroyed all traces of coli other bacteria and also improve the clarity of the water.
It's not abused, you don't put mud on all of that. The filtration rate is at 99.99% of all bacteria. We have that approved, we have that tested with different sources of water.
The filters are being piloted in KwaZulu-Natal, one of South Africa's poorest provinces. Imashabini is a small community situated about 400 km from the Durban city centre. Residents here haven't had clean tap drinking water in over 40 years.
All we have ever asked for is for the government to give us water. People are suffering, some even fall ill. Sometimes we find neighbors lying on the floor, unable to care for themselves. Some even soil themselves, but we have no way of cleaning them or making porridge for them, as there is no clean water.
Ntuli wants to roll out the filters en masse to help communities like these. He's hoping to open his own manufacturing plant in South Africa to produce the external components of filters. Sabitra Nadu, CGTN, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa.
The African continent is a youthful one. Young people between the ages of 15 and 35 constitute 1/3 of Africa's population, yet their footprint in government is almost non-existent. Today, we zoom in on the appointment of some young people to South Africa's cabinet, particularly the new Justice and Correctional Services Minister, Ronald Lamola. CGTN's Olisan Jamila has more.
Africa's youth influence on national politics remains limited. It's no wonder then that the appointment of South Africa's new Justice and Correctional Services Minister has been wildly lauded. 36-year-old Ronald Lamola is the youngest minister in President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet. The qualified and accomplished lawyer is described by his peers as highly intelligent and humble. Lamola told us that his appointment is bound to inspire South Africa's youth.
I'm very proud, and I know that it will inspire the whole youth of this country, because whatever I do, I have to do it for them. If I fail, they are going to fail. If I succeed, they will succeed, and then my success means that many young people will be given serious responsibilities across all sectors of society, not only in politics, either in business, in sports, or in any other issues in society.
At the Watershed ANC Elective Conference in 2017, Lamola was the youngest National Executive Committee member elected. He was also elected into the ANC's National Working Committee structure. The party's National Working Committee is responsible for the day-to-day running of the governing party's affairs. With all these responsibilities, including the latest appointment, Lamola says he's taking all of this in his stride.
I don't feel any pressure at all, because there are some few others in the cabinet who may not be of my age, but they are almost youthful. And also within the ranks of the ANC, there are a lot of young people that are coming up.
So we asked him, what is he bringing to the new cabinet?
Energy, as you can see, and fresh perspective, direction, but also to see that things are being done and to ensure that because this country is a youthful country, almost the majority are young people. So if we want to have solutions to our society, the solutions can only come from the youth of this country.
Many South Africans have expressed enthusiasm at having young people represented in the new cabinet.
I think it's actually a good idea, beautiful idea, because there's a difference between now and then, how we do things now, how we live our lives now, and nobody would understand more than us, the current generation and the future of South Africa, you know. So I think it's necessary for us as the youth at an early stage before we're supposed to be there to have the necessary experience and skills on how to run a country, how to be politically active and so forth.
I feel really good that young people are there now. They are out of government. They will be able to motivate others to pay attention to important matters about governance.
The new minister has already declared that he has big plans for his portfolio. Ronald Lamola also serves as the spokesperson for the governing ANC on land reform. He's the party's voice on its policy change to amend Section 25 to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Egyptian capital, Cairo, will be free from slums by the end of this year, according to City Governor Khaled Abdel Al. He says the government has devised a plan to improve and save informal settlements. In line with Cairo's urban facelift, the project aims to relocate people to new purpose-built social housing units. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more.
There are about 109 slums in Cairo. They house more than 10 million people. It's been accumulating for decades. An aggressive plan that started 5 years ago to develop the stricken areas is in its final year.
Slums are divided into dangerous areas for living and unsafe areas that need renovation. For the second type, we're developing these slums with proper infrastructure and services, as well as renovating the houses. The dangerous areas are in inhumane conditions, which means we have to move people out of the slums and into new cities. Those will be completely finished by the end of the year.
A successful model is Asmarat City, a number of housing complexes built specially for the people who were moved out of Cairo's slums.
We have built 40,000 housing units so far. They're fully furnished, and each complex has security, school, a club, and department stores. The budget we spent so far is 12 billion Egyptian pounds, and we're building more units for others who will move in.
The government is also providing vocational training for the people in the area to create job opportunities for the economically stricken families.
I wish all the areas will be beautiful and developed. I'm happy with the new projects to support and host the people who live in slums, and I hope they free the city completely from the slums.
It's an excellent decision. We've seen horrible things in slums like drugs and crime. Egypt deserves better, and these slums must disappear completely.
Eradicating slums in Cairo is not just about improving the lives of a few who live there, but it also has a positive social and economic impact on the whole community. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Zimbabwe government, employers and workers begin tripartite talks. And Angola's government shifts focus to improve food security.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Representatives from Zimbabwe's government, employers and labor unions are locked in negotiations aimed at addressing wage demands and stabilizing rising prices, among several other challenges plaguing the Southern African nation's economy. CGTN's Fari Mokutuya has the details on the latest effort to broker an agreement between the three.
The negotiations begin as discontent amongst workers, feeling the pinch of rising prices, mounts, and businesses battle shortages of fuel, currency, and electricity. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa hopes that tripartite talks can avert disruptive unrest.
Violence must never be used as a tool to gain temporal advantage at the expense of the people we must serve and protect. That old retrogressive culture will only serve to widen our fissures and exacerbate our socio-economic challenges.
A hitherto elusive, binding social contract is seen as the optimal outcome.
For us to get good outcomes, we have to change the template. The only way to change the template is to foster unity, to foster a sense of harmony and cohesion amongst the Zimbabweans. Once you talk to each other, you begin to address the most binding constraints. That's the new thinking in development discourse, that you don't have even to address every little constraint. Identify the most binding constraints, and you address those.
That will boost recovery prospects, which received a lift after commencement of an International Monetary Fund staff-monitored program in May.
The idea right now is to stabilize the economy and to rebalance the economy over the next 11 months. And the hope is that if we move on the economic and on the politics simultaneously, so we have to move ahead on the political reforms, whether it's repealing and replacing IPA or POSA, among others. The idea would be that hopefully by the end of, by sometime next year, there will be a discussion on potentially a deeper engagement between the IMF and Zimbabwe, with a potential debt restructuring and a potential financial re-engagement.
The success of the staff-monitored program hinges on bringing together different constituencies, be they political parties or business groups, and getting them to buy into the same vision. That will be put to the test during this recently launched and currently ongoing tripartite negotiating forum. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The agricultural sector accounts for just 12% economic output in Africa's second largest oil producer. Considering the country's untapped potential, that's pretty low. There are 57.4 million hectares of agricultural land and 5 million hectares of that is arable. Despite this, the Food and Agriculture Organization has just released $15 million to assist authorities in Luanda in eradicating hunger in parts of Angola. CGTN's Angelo Coppola explores the country's untapped potential.
It's not only about the big commercial state farms that the ministry has put on tender in April. This is part of a privatization drive.
Firstly, what we're trying to do is to give more inputs to the farmer, small farmer, to give them more input. I mean, when I'm talking about input, I'm talking about seed, I'm talking about fertilizer. We're talking about correction of soil that must be done, and a lot of things to introduce the new technology, to do the capacity building to that farmer, to show them how to manage more and better their small farmer.
The ministry has a plan that runs until 2022. They plan to develop family and commercial farming, but there's a clear bias towards the smallholder farmers.
And our goal is with the smallholder farmer, because they produce more than 80% of the food that we produce in our country. Yeah, our agriculture is based on smallholder farmers.
On the forestry front, the country's suffered from a scourge of illegal logging activities. The government stepped in and revised the rules and regulations to put an end to the practice. It's been a long time coming. The new approach has been in place since February.
All the measures that was being taken will have a very, very, very good result. Because now we see when we export wood from Angola, and the money is coming from outside to the country, and before it was not that situation. They're exporting everything from Angola, but the money also stayed there. Of course, that money is not for the government, it's money for the businessmen, but it must be in the country, because when we're exporting something, the money must come into the country.
The Agricultural Ministry has lots of challenges, and key among them is making sure that food security is taken care of for the Angolan people, and eventually to be able to export some of that product. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Luanda, Angola.
Following a South African court ruling that allowed the private production and consumption of marijuana, South Africa's cannabis sector is primed to explode. However, Swazi gold growers in neighboring Swaziland, who depended on demand from the country that surrounds them, may face economic ruin. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has the details.
Cannabis is widely referred to as marijuana, pot, or ganja. The psychoactive drug is usually used for medicinal and recreational purposes. In Swaziland, the crop offers its investors a large source of income.
I need some money from ganja. Secondly, I need This thing came like to me because I farm. Sometimes some cops come and ban it.
Mbuso is among the people counting on the higher demand for Swazi gold from South Africa. However, South Africa's recent legal amendment decriminalizing the use and cultivation of cannabis in private spaces is posing a challenge.
I need the man from the ganja to make something bigger on my feet at home, to farm maize and beans, you see. And I had to grow this first, and harvest it, and sell it, and got money, and go farm at home.
Florida-based company Profile Solutions Inc. recently received a 10-year license to produce and sell hemp and medical-grade cannabis in Eswatini. But small-scale farmers like Mbuso are still being prosecuted, detained and having their crops burnt.
They're good guys, they produce good product. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time.
A recent report by Prohibition Partners has created high hopes of a sector that could be worth up to $7 billion. The UN reports that over 10,000 tons of cannabis is produced in Africa every year. While subsistence farmers like Mbuso worry about their future, a few African governments are waking up to the potential of a legal cannabis industry. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Still ahead on Africa Live. Traumatized children in the CAR find healing through art therapy program.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In the Central African Republic, the security situation remains volatile despite a peace agreement signed earlier this year between the government and various warlords. Children, who often bear the brunt of war, have been affected by violence often carried out in their presence. However, an art program in Lazare camp, north of the capital, aims to help them cope with trauma through drawing. CGTN's Brian Toussaint reports.
Children at Lazare camp in war-torn Central African Republic drawing scenes they encounter in their daily life. Armored vehicles in red fill their papers. Lots of red. Psychologist Mamie Noria Maniko pores over the creations, an indicator of the children's mental health and a much-needed outlet. So far, 233 children aged 5 to 15 who bear symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder have been identified.
With the drawing, the child expresses themselves better, and it removes the barrier that sometimes exists between the child and the adult.
For 5 years, Kaga Bandoro, that lies about 200 miles north of the capital, Bangui, and houses the camp, was in the hands of armed groups. Militias fight for resources and carry out extortion and acts of violence. Many children have seen beatings, rapes, or murder, while some have witnessed their homes invaded, their parents humiliated, hurt, abducted, or killed. 12-year-old Hervé has attended 3 therapy sessions now. Hervé's drawings always show the same things: pickup trucks with machine guns mounted on the back, a body in a river, a hand in a well, a house on fire, with his dad inside.
What made me draw this picture is that my father and I were going to Mbaya district, and then he was burned at home by Seleka, and when I fled, I saw a body in the water. To get to sleep, I have to draw every time to get the images out of my head.
Hervé's mother, widowed by the Seleka in 2013, says the sessions have helped the boy and her relationship with him.
Every night he has nightmares. When I ask him for a favor, when I can't work, he refuses. He says he's not a mule, so I argue with him over it. But since this drawing workshop, we understand each other better.
In Kagabandoro, relative calm returned recently after the government and 14 warlords signed a peace pact in February, the 8th in a series of treaties. For now, at least, the militiamen are confined to their base, although sporadic violence continues on the outskirts of the town. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
And coming up in sports, Italy beat 10-man Mali to set up semi-final tie with Ukraine.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start with football, and Italy has set up a sport against Ukraine in the FIFA Under-20 World Cup semi-finals after defeating 10-man Mali 4-2 on Friday.